Good evening and welcome to the April 7th meeting of the Monmouth City Council. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is what the public part of the public meeting law is about, and this is what our jobs are about, is listening to folks. I will ask our city recorder, Pam Dornbush, to take the roll call, please.
Councillor Belts?
Here.
Councillor Lopez?
Present.
Councillor Oberst?
Here.
Councillor Carey?
Here.
Councillor McKeel?
Here.
Councillor Ridgway?
Here.
Mayor Kuntz?
I am here, and I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. If you're able and you'd like to join us, please stand. We start each meeting with our consent calendar. Tonight, that includes the minutes of the March 17th City Council meeting, and I would entertain a motion to approve those as submitted or any additions or corrections.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Oberst, for the motion and Councillor Belts for the second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We will get those filed officially with our records. This evening, we do have one business agenda item. And prior to that, we are taking public comment. I hope you all had an opportunity to submit those. I do have a few here, and we will take those this evening. When we get to the business part of our meeting, I will remind folks that this is our time to ask questions, deliberate, and make a decision if we choose to go forward. That's the public participation part has been happening. We have received the emails, we have listened to phone calls, we have heard public testimony. So I'm going to ask that as we are discussing this evening, I'm going to ask you to please respect our time to talk and be heard. If there is a lot of cheering, clapping, booing, or commotion or talking, I'm going to have to gavel the meeting to a pause so we can stop, collect ourselves, and continue our meeting. If that happens a second time, we will actually get up and leave the room and ask our staff to kind of get things settled down. And if there is additional commotion after that, we will stop the meeting. You're all here. We appreciate you being here. We know you're on your own time. We're on our own time as well. And we really need to kind of try to conduct our business tonight, get information, and hopefully make a decision, as difficult as it might be one way or the other. So with that, I am going to call up folks for public comment. Again, come up front. There's a microphone. You push the button in the center of the microphone, and when the red light is on, that's when you're talking. And we will be timing. We ask that public comment be limited to 3 minutes. Here's our timer. And first, I would like to call, I don't know if I've got one or two, Don Taylor, Bruce Garrett up front. We'll have you give your name and residence, and then we will start the timer.
Good evening and thank you. The reason I wanted to come tonight is pardon?
Oh, take a seat.
Hopefully it won't be that long. Or I could have moved it up. Anyway, we had the utility locators coming through I'm at 410 Burwood Avenue North. And the utility people came through and were marking all along the lawn, putting in little flags. And he wasn't sure, but he indicated that there's planning on tearing the road up or doing some type of utility work through there. And we never got any notice, and I'm curious what's gonna happen. I was gonna lay down some new bark dust. Should I wait?
I am. So we typically, we may not know the answer up here. You did give your phone number and email, and I'm going to have our city public works director contact you directly, if that's okay. He'll have a better answer for you.
Okay.
I don't know that he's here to be able to answer. He is in the back. If you go to the back of the room, David Carr will have information for you.
Okay, I was just curious about that. And of course, as I see on the agenda here this evening, we're concerned also about the land swap and the additional housing that's going to be placed up behind us, because they do come down into our area. So just, we are concerned and want to see what's going on.
Thank you. If you want to turn the microphone off, and then David's back in that corner and he's got information about street repairs. Priscilla Kennan.
Priscilla Cannon, 662 Orchard Drive. This is regarding fair and impartial council voting. We know that a councilman went before the legislature and gave testimony in favor of a bill that would directly put him and his seat here to vote on a major decision long before legal and or citizens review ever took place. I would therefore request that this councilman and his 6'5" person recuse himself from voting on this topic, as he has shown now to be biased in his vote. We also note that others sitting in front of this audience also testified long before the neighbors, landowners, and citizens were told. I request my testimony tonight be on the record for future use in evidentiary material.
Thank you. Can you turn the microphone off, please, Priscilla? Thank you. We typically don't engage with this, but I will let you know. Councillor Oberst, unless you submitted written testimony, you were never at the Capitol for this, that I recall.
That is correct. I'll also correct the record at 6'8". But no, I didn't go to the legislature. I did submit written testimony, however.
Okay, thank you. All right. And Don McCarthy.
Don McCarthy, 4920 Matney Road, Monmouth, Oregon. I've written 3 different presentations for tonight. The first 2 were disapproved by family members. They considered me angry and disrespectful. I was not wanting to be considered a grumpy old man, so I wrote a 3rd one and cannot do anything about being the old man, but I'll try not to appear grumpy. The 3rd attempt was perfect. Then I was told I can only speak on items on the agenda. I just got over being grumpy and angry, but now I was confused. I thought this was why everyone here to talk about the big agenda item, and somehow I was going to have to beat around the bush to talk about that subject matter. However, I could talk about non-agenda items, and this made no sense to me. But I got pointed in another direction when it was suggested that I read what the city wrote for their guiding principles for all we do. You can find these 20 principles on the city website. I instantly had plenty of subject matter. Let's look at number 16, the preservation and careful management of natural resources. I contend this was not done. The preservation of farmland was not considered at all. Viewed as development was a much better use. Yet our city says where great things grow. Well, you'll never grow another thing when you put concrete over it. Now let's look at number 5. We encourage creativity and collaboration. Well, the staff certainly excelled in the creativity part of this statement, but however, failed miserably in the collaboration. I'm supposed to give examples. How about the illusion of Ass Creek being an unsurmountable problem for developers? Cities sprang up around creeks from the beginning of time. However, this stream that half the people in this room could jump across was a deal breaker. As for collaboration, ask the people in this room if there was any outreach. Completely left out of the loop. Now, I will admit there was collaboration, but it was with the developers and the California landowners. Now let's look at number 9. Community engagement is the heart of successful city governance. The city was engaged with developers, real estate industry, and the landowners. These people, along with city officials and staff, all testified for this bill. Assumed city officials reached out to these individuals while ignoring everyone who might be in opposition. There are more examples of these guiding principles not being followed. The guiding principles are more than feel-good statements. They need to be put into practice.
Thank you, Don. Shannon McCarthy Thomas. Blame your dad.
Shannon McCarthy Thomas, 8625 Parker Road, Independence, Oregon, 97351. I'm here because I talked to my toddler a lot yesterday about doing something brave when it scared you. So I'm going to talk about local government representation. When people think about government, they often picture big, distant institutions, Congress, the president, decisions being made far away in which they often feel very little representation. But the truth is, some of the most important decisions affecting our daily lives happen much closer to home. Local government is where policy becomes personal. It's the decisions made in rooms like these that shape the everyday lives of residents, the conditions of our streets, the local businesses, the safety of our neighborhood, and the zoning of our community. These are all guided by the choices you guys get to make for us. When people feel represented, they feel invested. They trust the process, they participate, and that participation strengthens the entire community. In light of recent events, I can tell you this is not a current reality in this community. On the other hand, when residents feel unheard or disconnected, it creates distance, not just from decisions, but from the system itself and the entire community. So the importance of local government representation isn't just about politics. It's about connection. It's about making sure every person feels seen, heard, and valued in the place that they call home. Because at the end of the day, government works best when it's closest to the people. Thank you for your service and commitment to this community.
Thank you, Shannon. David Pastor.
David Pastor, Monmouth. Will that suffice, ma'am? Very good. I, like Don McCarthy, have read the guiding principles and they're very good. They are excellent guides. There's things in there, though, that I want to point to attention to the people here and to the counselors. One of the phrases is empower the community. And I think this whole process is demonstrated by the number of people here that they have not felt empowered by the decisions that have been made, mainly by the staff at this point, not by the city council. Honesty is a word in there also that's very important, and I agree with that. Ms. Duffner has said many times that we are the 8th most severe rent burdened city in the state. That's bad. When you research it, though, it actually is a statistic from 2022. If you Google right now, you'll find a 2025 statistic which says we are the 39th most severe rent burdened city in the state, meaning there are, of 58, 40 states almost worse than us. We're good. Nothing has been done, nothing's been annexed, and somehow we have risen from being in a terrible state to a very good state. Now, what concerns me about this is, I'm not saying Ms. Duffner has lied, but our city manager said that they provide you as city councilors unbiased information. And to me, that seems very biased. Fair. That's another word in there. City Attorney Justin Thorpe is here, and he has presented probably a couple hours on this issue. I went to the work session where you've listened to him quite a bit. We brought our attorney on February 17th, and Mayor Kuntz, you gave him 3 minutes. Is that fair? The end of the statement says that our work will result in us being heard, our concerns addressed, and we will be understood. And I'm going to ask the people here to raise your hand if you feel that you have been heard and that you feel that you have been understood and your concerns have been addressed. Show the council if you really feel that way. One hand, one brave man. I'm going to ask the question differently. How many of you here feel that you have not been heard? How many of you have not had your concerns addressed? And how many don't feel understood? Raise your hand, please. That's significant testimony. You must listen to it. I want to give you one other item if I have, do I have 8 seconds? Oh, rats. Okay, quick answer. A week ago Sunday, I was attacked at the homeless center by a dog and bit. I'll give you more information later when I find out I'm not infected with rabies. It was a bad day. Thank you.
Thank you. Joan Bosterman, the microphone's already on.
One 14920 Ferns Corner Road, Monmouth, Oregon. And practically every day I'm at 10995 Mistletoe Road. No hip hip hoorays on Tom McCall Day, March the 22nd, just passed, to honor the very special Oregon governor whose legacy protects our state's beauty and bounty. Instead, the laws he promoted to prevent encroachment of crass commercialism, his words, face erosion. Oregon.gov, gone 43,000 Oregon crop acres. While OregonState.edu, 400,000 farm and forest acres have been converted since 1982 through 2017. I couldn't find more recent numbers. We indeed face down bureaucrats like brave Governor McCall did, even when dying of cancer, and we usually do it when we don't feel listened to. Governor McCall's famous quote, "Oregon is an inspiration," his whisper from the grave, "my responsibility to make it better." Now the responsibility, it's yours. I don't know the former governor's salary, but the current Oregon governor makes $98,600 per year, according to Business Insider, November the 21st, 2025. Monmouth population, about 11,651. Its city manager's base salary, $178,484. That's before generous benefits. $178,000, and she doesn't even live in Monmouth. So she doesn't pay taxes to support our schools, which are already aging and in overcapacity. Section 30D of SB 1537 references affordable housing, one of the councilmen asked about. And that is defined as 80 to 120% of median family income. 80% for Monmouth's average family size of 3 is $66,700 to qualify for affordable housing. This is what it is driving. This income figure is what is driving the city council affordable housing decisions. Thank you for your time. I know that you do this free of charge, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. And I'm sorry, I'm going to take a point of privilege here. Folks mentioned the potential conflict of interest of Councillor Oberst, that he did submit testimony to legislation. That is a common thing that staff and elected officials do. And I, as I have said before, also testified before the legislature about this issue. It has been gotten back to me that there are rumors that I potentially am benefiting in some way personally, or someone in my family is benefiting personally from this action. And I want to clear that up. And what I will say about that, today I found out that it was supposedly my son-in-law who was benefiting if this action is approved. Since his mother and father are in the audience tonight and they submitted letters against the action, I'm not sure how the rumor would get around that my son-in-law would benefit or anyone in my family. So I did want to take a point of privilege and mention that. If folks are hearing that, I'm sorry, I'm not sure where that's coming from. At the hearing, we had an opportunity to declare conflicts of interest, and we have none. No. I'm going to go ahead and consider this. We, again, had a public hearing, took public testimony. We have continued to receive written information and this public testimony. Folks have spoken about this. Anything that came to us after February 24th may not be considered part of the official public record. That February 24th was the last day to receive official information as part of that. But we have continued to read things that were sent to us. We have continued to hear from folks, and I'm sure we have all taken that information seriously and into account. I am going to call up Suzanne Duffner, our City Community and Economic Development Director, to present where we are in this process and start our deliberations.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, members of the City Council. Give me just one moment to load up my computer. I have a short little PowerPoint to summarize the staff report. So hang on just a second. Yep, I will. I'm just getting set up here. No. Okay, thank you for your patience. This is the staff report for House Bill 2647 UGB Land Exchange and Legislative Amendment 25-02. This is a follow-up to the public hearing that the council held. Sorry, we got the wrong screen going here. We will get this right. Yeah, that's good. Okay, I'm ready to go. Sorry again for that delay. Technology is great when it works. So again, this is a follow-up report to the public hearing that was held in February. Just wanted to quickly recap, spend a little bit of time, what the proposal is. So there's two pieces to what the council is considering this evening. There's an urban growth boundary land exchange that involves removing 90 acres of residential designated property that's currently inside the Monmouth urban growth boundary. And that is represented by the orange area in the southwest portion of Monmouth on the map that's seen. And then that would be replaced with approximately 75 net acres that is shown in two locations, one on the Mistletoe Road area to the west in yellow, and then also a smaller 5-acre piece located in the southeast corner next to the UGB off of Talmadge Road. So that is one of the decisions the council is being faced with this evening. And then the second one is a legislative amendment, and that is what comprehensive plan map designations to apply to those areas that would be added to the UGB. In terms of the process, looking at the UGB land exchange, this is authorized by a House Bill 2647 that passed in the 2025 legislative session. It's also enabled by the Senate Bill 1537, which actually created a more streamlined pathway for cities to do UGB land swaps, given the statewide housing shortage issues that were being faced. The process is not a land use decision, but it does require the city's decision to be reviewed and approved by Polk County. And then it also must go to the State Department of Land Conservation and Development for review and approval. The legislative amendment portion of the council's decision is what we call a legislative decision. It's a type 4 decision by the Monmouth City Code that outlines those procedures. That was initiated by the council back in November of last year. The process that's followed for that includes a public hearing with the Planning Commission. That occurred on January 21st and February 4th. The second public hearing that's required was before the council, as I mentioned, was in February, on February 17th. That written record was held open for an additional week for additional written testimony. That testimony was then forwarded to council on March 17th. And that has brought us to this evening where we have deliberations and a decision. Just by way of background information of why the city is considering this UGB land exchange. The city has had a severely limited residential land supply for a number of years. It's been a council goal for over 5 years to address housing and affordable housing issues in particular. We recognize that there are portions of our existing boundary that are unlikely to develop due to environmental issues and also property owners that do not wish to annex or have their properties developed. Our urban growth boundary, I'm glad somebody mentioned Tom McCall's famous bill. That was the anti-urban sprawl bill that was created. Monmouth's growth boundary was created in 1978, so 48 years ago, and has never been adjusted for residential land. And I think an important thing to point out is that those urban growth boundaries are intended to be a 20-year supply of land. So Monmouth has been using that residential supply of land for over 48 years and have not made any changes or adjustments to it. And that Senate Bill 100 never intended urban growth boundaries to be permanent. These were not meant to be easy to change or modify, but they were meant to be able to grow and change as cities grow. And so I think that that's an important point to keep in mind, that it has been so long. And we've certainly found over the last 48 years where those pain points are in our UGB. All of the easy properties to develop have developed, and now we're faced with this being the issue of why we have such a low inventory of serviceable lots, less than a dozen available to build on, which for a town our size makes it very, very challenging. So we know we've had these land supply constraints. We're not consistently meeting our needed housing forecasts. So the city has done our forecasting. We know we need about 60 new dwellings a year to meet those targets. For the last 5 years, we've consistently fell below that. So all the while, we've seen housing costs continue to rise. And I think the last time I had pulled up the average home sales price was $465,000 in Monmouth. And so doing the math of what you would have to afford, what you would have to make to afford a mortgage at that rate, somewhere between $110,000 to $140,000 would be what you need to make to afford that kind of mortgage. And it doesn't look better on the rental side either when you look at the cost of 1-bedroom units in Monmouth. Somebody on Social Security or making minimum wage would not be able to afford that average price of a 1-bedroom of $1,200 to $1,300 a month. So when you have that constrained supply, of course you have a limited supply, and the demand is still there, and those prices continue to go up. So the solution, the city has been working on this housing need issue for the last 6 years, at least, through updating our comprehensive plan in 2020. We did that forecast of how many residential land units were needed. The city is able to decide, well, we're required by the state to have a 20-year land supply. We can decide what growth rates, if we want to grow aggressively or if we want to grow more slowly. And so our population forecast that drives these numbers of how many housing units are needed assumes a slow to moderate growth pattern for Monmouth. So it doesn't assume an extremely aggressive or fast growing community. After we completed the housing needs analysis to know the types and number of units that were needed, we next turned to what are the strategies to actually help get that housing built. And one of those strategies that came out because of this shortage of serviceable land available to build on was completing a land swap. And that's what also led to the House Bill 2647, recognizing Monmouth's challenging situation to allow a very targeted and limited land exchange process to address this time-sensitive issue and the statewide importance of needed housing. I want to just remind the council of the decision criteria. These are all spelled out in the more detailed February 17th council staff report. But the House Bill 2647 decision criteria allows the city to use that more expedited land exchange process found in Senate Bill 1537. But it does put more specific parameters on us that keeps it very limited to a one-time expansion of removing a swap of removing 90 acres and adding 75 net acres. So actually shrinking the size of the UGB slightly because of that. So the land added has to be designated for residential use. Again, we know this is to address the needed housing. It needs to be contiguous with the city limits. Not more than 25% of that acreage in a map flood or wetland area, because these areas are extremely expensive to build on, if you can build on them. They take a lot of environmental permitting and may or may not be approved. And the properties also need access to city utilities. I mean, that's a critical component to considering what lands are more likely to be built on. And then we've seen the importance of the need of the owner's consent, because we have several landowners that have not, again, wanted to be annexed or part of the city, and we can't force them to do that. So the land going out, the land removed, criteria for that, it needs to be more heavily impacted by those mapped flood and wetland areas. So more than 25% of the property covered in those, and then not already annexed or on our city sewer service. So it hasn't taken steps to become urbanized. In terms of now looking at that second decision the council has to make and the criteria that your decision must be based on, there are 4 of them for, again, deciding which are the appropriate comprehensive plan map designations to put on those newly added areas. So you're looking at that it meets one of 3 standards. There's been a map error, a change of conditions, there's a public need for that type of land. The second criteria is considering that it's consistent with the goals and policies of the city's comprehensive plan. Third criterion is that there's adequate public facilities, services, and transportation networks are in place or plan to be provided concurrently with the development of the property. And the fourth consideration is that it's appropriate considering the surrounding land use and the density and pattern of development in the area. The February 17th staff report goes into a lot of detail, provides those findings that show how each of those demonstrates how those can be met. Again, there's 2 parcels proposed to be brought in as part of the land swap. The larger acreage parcel, we call Area 1, off of Mistletoe Road. The proposed plan map designation is medium density residential on that piece. And then the smaller 5-acre piece, the proposed designation for the parcel on the east side is the low density residential. I do want to take some time. We received a lot of thoughtful feedback, and we appreciate that the community has engaged and took the time to provide comments on the proposal. And so I just wanted to take an opportunity. There's more responses in the staff report for this meeting as well, but just looking at what some of those concerns are and then the staff responses to those. And so certainly one of the key concerns that we have heard is just over the concern of the loss of farmland, that we as Oregonians value heavily the preservation of agricultural lands. It's part of our identity, especially in the Willamette Valley. And so again, just reminding folks that the UGB is not a permanent static line. We are required by state law to provide our 20-year land supply. And that because of this being a land swap and actually a reduction to Monmouth's urban growth boundary, we are preserving more farmland through this UGB land swap than if we were to not do that UGB swap. So I think that's just, again, keeping that into context. And then also along those lines, we've heard a number of concerns about land use compatibility, in particular with Area 1 off of Mistletoe Road, that it's concerns that it's surrounded by existing farming opportunity or operations that's not compatible with residential, that there's conflicts there. And when we evaluate this criteria from our city codes, we consider what the plan designation, not the actual use of properties are, for determining compatibility. So I put a map up to show the adjacent parcel directly east of the Area 1 parcel. It's shown in the yellow on the map with the arrow pointing to it. That is planned for low density residential. The owner at this point has elected not to annex and continue farming, but the planned use and future eventual use of that property is planned for residential. So that's where we see that in residential to residential, the compatibility. And I do understand that there are concerns about the conflicts with farming activities. And unfortunately, we do have areas where those all over our UGB were surrounded by farmland. So these things do exist, especially in Oregon. And the state law does not give us the ability to create agricultural buffers because that would eat up more farmland. So those are, controlled through right to farm laws and also by recording covenants for the new property owners and homeowners that are moving to those areas to make them aware when they buy property that there would be regular and what those types of agricultural uses are that they can expect to see there. So just some of the mitigation that's part of that. We had a number of concerns that spoke to traffic and inadequate infrastructure. We again point out that we are already planning for growth as part of our city comprehensive plan, and our master utility plans use that same population forecast. And so those infrastructure impacts are taken into account. We do size our facilities for future growth. And again, that the UGB is getting slightly smaller. So there will be specific infrastructure impacts that will need to be studied, reviewed, and mitigated at the time when we have an actual specific development proposal. I pointed out at the earlier hearing about all the many steps that land has to go through before a shovel can break ground and start building foundations. Like there's 4 or 5 different steps before you get to that building permit. And so there is opportunity for future public comment and review once we have more of those detailed traffic impact analysis and stormwater analysis that are done. And those costs are borne by development. There are some boundaries on that in terms of the costs need to be proportionate to the impacts of the development is what we call it in planning, but developers do pay growth impact fees to help offset those costs. There were quite a few concerns, public comments about environmental impacts to flooding areas and wetlands and wildlife. again, I would point out that we are actually having fewer impacts by moving this at an area that's away from South Fork of Ash Creek, goes through that area that's proposed for removal, the 90-acre parcel. And there's fewer environmental resources on the proposed areas coming in. The bill does not exempt the city, it's part of our land swap bill, from any of the development permitting and environmental compliance regulations. So before any development would be able to occur on these properties, there need to be detailed wetland studies prepared and preservation measures put into place and state agency review and oversight of that process. And then we had some quite a few comments about the property not being contiguous, specifically Area 1 to the city limits as the House bill requires. I put up a map just to help kind of visualize this a little bit better, and it's kind of faint on this overhead, but the blue outline is a small rectangular portion on the easterly portion of that property that's already inside the UGB. You can see it in the red shaded area. Oh, thanks. I've got my Vanna that's able to, oh, I thought she was going to point it out on the map. But the contiguous is established through that larger parcel of Area 1. And then the mistletoe right of way does not separate the parcel from being contiguous with the city limits. That's under the Oregon laws and land use interpretation of the definition of contiguous. So through the property, there's an arrow pointing to the property on the south portion of Mistletoe Road off of Sunset Lane that establishes that contiguous point. And then in conclusion, staff is recommending approval of both the House Bill 2647 UGB land exchange and the legislative amendment. The next step, if the council were to act on these two decisions, and it would be to direct staff to prepare an ordinance to adopt those. The council does have options to consider approving the two decisions, approving them with modifications, or denying or taking no action on the two decisions before you this evening. So that concludes my presentation. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. And I just noticed somebody turned in a headset. If there is someone else in the room who would like to use one, Saber, I think got that. Do you see we have someone who would be interested in using one of the hearing loops? Thank you. Saber's on her way to you. All right. So thank you for that. With that, I will start offering opportunity for questions. What I'd like to do is give anybody 2 questions if you can, and then I want to move on and make sure everybody gets an opportunity to ask. If we're prepared to start, I'm actually going to kind of go in order up here on the dais, if we can do that. And Councilor Ridgway, do you have something to start with? Do you have questions? Nope. Okay. Councilor Beltz, did you have something right off the top that you? Statement, but not. Okay, let's wait. Well, after we take staff questions. Thank you, Councilor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you very much, Ms. Duffner, for this report and for the report that was included in our packet today. I would like to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the contiguity discussion. So, it said that, and if I recall correctly, you indicated that the parcel must be contiguous with the existing city limits, not necessarily the land that is being added. And this parcel does have that strip of contiguity with the city limits. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And the justification for that term, it seems that, and I'm sorry for getting into the weeds here a little bit, that definition of parcel, right? So how are we defining parcel with this, within this process? In my mind, it would seem that intuitively parcel would be that section that is being added, not the entire tax lot per se, but maybe intuition is wrong, right? I'm not a legal expert in land use law. And so I'm looking, I think, for some direction on where that definition is established to build confidence that we are applying that correctly.
Yeah, so you are correct in that we are basing that contiguous finding on looking at the larger inclusive parcel. So the entire tax lot 400 is also what it's identified as. And so, yes, because the portion that's already inside the UGB is contiguous, that meets the definition as we find it. But I don't know if the legal wanted to weigh in on that with a little bit more description.
Yeah, I did want to hear from them about that, if you don't mind, Councilor Lopez, because I know you mentioned that we did have discussions with Polk County and Department of Land Conservation Development. DLCD is the agency for the state that actually determines our planning and our land use rules and regulations. So I wanted to hear if our attorneys in that conversation had this discussion and what we might have heard there.
Thank you. There's two of us because we had two different conversations. I talked to the former city attorney who was the primary drafter of the legislation and former head of DLCD. And yes, he reads the statute the same way that Suzanne does. That was the intent. And I think more broadly, it was intended to follow the similar criteria to what would qualify for annexation under the existing annexation statutes. I was not present for the meeting with DLCD, so I will let Greg talk about that.
Yeah, so I was present on the phone call with DLCD, and I brought it to their attention, and it wasn't even on their radar. It was a non-issue for them.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you very much for that clarification. DLCD, certainly they are the experts in this area. My second question is relating to the process that we went through, and I say kind of the general we, right? The public, the city, it's the legislature, et cetera. There have been a couple questions concerned or raised concerning I think, the manner with which we engaged, there was engagement with the legislature and or, how this would create potential conflicts of interest. I don't read currently anything about there being conflicts of interest in concerns in that space. But I would like to understand a little bit more. And I think we touched on it earlier, but I'd like to understand a little bit more about, how that legislative process looked, and forgive me if I should be directing this toward others in the room, but how that legislative process looked from the city's perspective and what the legislature expected from us, from the city throughout that process before them.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. The legislative process was initially the city thought that Senate bill that I had referenced earlier, the 1537, we were hopeful that was going to address Monmouth's issues when that was adopted in 2024 to provide that streamlined process for doing the land swap. And unfortunately, because we are completely surrounded by agricultural land, we were automatically kicked out and not eligible for that, as are many cities throughout Oregon. As I understand it, nobody has used that process to date because it was written so restrictively. So the city approached our legislative representatives about this problem and this issue. And we knew from our housing production strategy that that was one of the top strategies for addressing the land supply need. And so legislation was crafted to allow that Senate Bill 1537 process to be used in Monmouth, but again, only in certain limited conditions or criteria. So very technical planning analysis in terms of, looking strategically where are areas that Monmouth can realistically grow and develop land quickly without a lot of barriers. And so because we're bounded by Independence on our eastern border, we have property owners who have put conservation easements on their property to the north of the north of the city. We have two creeks, Middle Fork of Ash Creek on our north border, South Fork on our south border. There really were not a lot of area, and then taking into account where landowners have told us they do not want to annex and they do not want to be currently part of the city. It became a very technical exercise in terms of, and then again, considering those environmental constraints, where there are those greatest opportunities to develop property, just to kind of get us through this difficult time where we haven't had property owners willing to urbanize and annex their property. So it was with that in mind that those criteria were developed to try to make it a very targeted approach. And the bill specifically, you'll see, doesn't have specific land or addresses or tax lots carved out in it, but knowing all of the constraints around the city, we were looking at where are there willing property owners and where do they have access to city services, and where are they not bound by those environmental creek and flood constraints. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, but that was kind of some of the logic and thinking that went into the legislation and that legislative process. I don't know if Rochelle or anybody wanted to comment further on that.
Thank you. I think the one thing that I would like to add is in regards to when we were in the legislative process, they had requested do we know of landowners that would be interested in doing this, because they didn't want to pass it if it wasn't going to have anybody interested in bringing their property in. And I think it was at that time, which that would be probably February of last year, might have been a little bit, I'm not sure on the timeline, January, February of last year, when the landowner was contacted to see if there was any interest. So just to give you an idea that was part of what the legislator wanted to see, that we'd add interest that this could go through, because why would they pass it if it wasn't going to be able to be used? So.
I will add one more bit about the legislative process. And as Suzanne had mentioned, the legislature did pass a bill in the prior year that they had passed specifically to make more cities able to take advantage of their UGBs, to be able to take UGBs in areas and maybe potentially find ways to develop it by potentially doing these land exchanges. When it was determined that most cities in Oregon didn't qualify under that process, there were discussions about could they make technical fixes to the bill. They couldn't do that. Our legislator thought maybe we would find out if this one specific thing, what the process might be, how that would be applied, how that would be considered by the legislature. And the process, I will say, the bill passed both the House and the Senate nearly unanimously. And Since then, at the same time, Klamath Falls was making the same request. Their bill also passed.
I think
right?
it was Roseburg. Sorry.
Oh, Roseburg? Oh, Roseburg, sorry. And then in this last session, I believe Woodburn also received a specific bill to do this same thing. Legislatures are understanding that in order to meet the statewide housing goals and our state land use laws that we are required to have this supply, that they needed to do some things. So that my understanding is additional cities might be interested in coming forward as well, as what we've heard. So this is not, we are not the only ones who are facing this tension between the goals we're required to meet and the way that our cities have been built to this point. So that's one more thing. I'm sorry, sir, can you have a seat?
The attorney to identify himself for the record that gave testimony that's only requested.
Would you identify yourselves, please?
Sure, I'm Greg Goble. I work at Sherman, Johnny and Hoyt. I'm an attorney with Justin.
Yep, both with our law firm. Both have been involved in this issue. All right, sorry for that addition. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That concludes my two questions, and I certainly have additional comments that I'll reserve for later.
Come back around. I'll go to Councillor Carey. For your first couple.
For my first couple. Yeah, I'd like to add a little context to the origin of this and the need of this, and you alluded to it, but I'd like to go down a little tighter. I reviewed the housing needs analysis and then subsequent to that, the housing production strategy document. And as you did note, this is a 20-year planning horizon that we're working on. So we're working towards providing housing for a population that we expect at 2039. And the Portland State population projections suggest that there'll be, by 2039, 3,400 new residents in Monmouth. That's their projection. That's what we work off. That's the number that we use to identify our housing needs. They also project that there'll be 1,200 new households and new units to accommodate the current needs, and the growth would be approximately 1,200 as well. So that's where the need comes from. And I'm just going to leave that as number one, as a context providing a bit of information that comes from our housing needs. This is our housing production strategy document. There's a housing needs analysis that this really summarizes in there. So that's the reason for this. It's not just, and I want to remind people that all of this will be dependent upon private development. This is not a city project. Private developers will do this if any development, and if and when development happens, it'll be done on the private side. My second question, and Suzanne, you've alluded to this, both in writing and other times, both the constraints that we have, the floodplains and the wetlands, they get a little, they're a little harder to find sometimes. But you did also note, and this is, I think, a big one to us, noted that property owners who are unwilling or uninterested in annexation or development. In other words, they're happy with the way their property is right now. They're inside the urban growth boundary. That property, because they can change their mind, cannot be, we can't just automatically, well, as they said, they didn't want to do it, so that's okay. We got to get some different. We can't do that because their mind could be changed on that.
Right, yeah, that's one of the challenges as we went through that housing needs analysis in 2020. You know, we looked fine on paper if you count all of the land inside the growth boundary, but where we are constrained is our city limits. And that's the 3 or 4 large landowners on our western boundary who have simply decided they're not motivated, they do not want to annex, and we can't require that. So that unfortunately, we cannot use that as a justification for expanding our growth boundary. We're left with the option of doing an adjustment or a swap to kind of work around that, so to speak, in terms of trying to find a match between willing landowner and then somebody, and removing the ones that don't want to develop. So.
For the enlightenment of the council as well as those present, where are those properties located where there are landowners that are not interested, for their own reasons? I'm not disparaging in any way, but they've decided they don't want to participate in this sort of a process. Generally, I don't care about names, but generally, where are they?
Yeah, so of course the 90 acres on the southwest portion of town has not wanted to annex their property. Moving north along the western boundary, kind of where Church Street and Main Street dead end to where the water reservoir property, there's 2 very large parcels there. And then the piece that is kind of the intervening piece between Western Oregon University's fields and the parcel that's being farmed, but the property owner doesn't want to annex. And then that's adjacent to where we're looking to do one of the UGB swap outs. So those are kind of the 3 major areas. And then I pointed out property to our northern boundary, kind of between 99 and Riddle Road. That's all been placed, at least the portion that's directly adjacent to our existing city limits, it's all been placed in conservation easement, which means it can't be, that development right has been taken away. So those properties can't be, no housing can be put on those. They're left into a natural preserve, even though it's inside of our growth boundary. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that property that you just talked, just north of Gentle Woods. I live in that neighborhood, so
Well, I was actually referring to the one west of there, right?
But
So
that
between
extends.
99 and Riddle Road, but you're right. There is also conservation easement that's been put north of Gentle Woods Park, but that's just along the creek that goes through
Right.
there, not the whole parcel. So
No, but
Mhm.
wide enough to make it difficult to get across to
Yeah.
develop and access
Right.
that developable land that is to the north.
Yeah,
So that's
that in addition to
that is a
infrastructure.
barrier.
Yeah, there's a major
Yeah.
sewer line that needs to come back, build back to feed that. Mhm.
Okay, and all of those areas that are along the western border are those that are impacted by agricultural practices from time to time.
Correct.
Yeah, and the same is true in my neighborhood occasionally, and it's not a problem. We love living in a rural and agricultural area. We put up with the dust and that sort of thing gladly. But not everybody does understand that, but okay, thank you.
And that brought me one thought. You mentioned about the right to farm laws, and that potentially there could be a covenant placed on homes. Is that, or do you know if that's true in the Hoffman Estates neighborhood, since it also is bordered by farmland to its north? And
Yeah, I'd have to
I
go
don't
back
know
and
the-
read that. We did get a copy of the covenants, conditions, restrictions for that development that were placed on it. I don't recall specifically that language being in there, but I can go back and take a look at that.
we don't place the covenant. That is just required of the developer, or
The city could potentially, through our subdivision conditioning process, if we can tie it to a public health safety need issue, could potentially put a condition on that development, that the developer put that language into a CCNR. So yeah, we could direct, and it's just taking a quick look over at the city attorney to see if there's any clarification on if that's would be a legal condition to place.
I think that's right. Yeah, we we could. We're a long way from that point.
I'm just curious, since Hoffman Estates is roughly in the same sort of position, and that was developed because it's not only inside the urban growth boundary, but it's inside our city limits. And I just was curious if that was that side question.
It definitely wasn't required by the city in that instance. I can say that for certain, but it may have been voluntarily put on there by the developer. I don't recall seeing that specific language. So, yeah.
Okay. And I will go to Councilor McKeel for if you have two questions for before we start another round.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question goes back to 1978. And how did they come up with where the urban growth boundary was going to be? And okay, I needed to ask for an historian to come into the room. Well, it seems to me in that southwest corner, and we can't, right now, can't be developed because the person who owns the property doesn't want it developed. But that property also has the creek and it has a wetland. And that's where the 90 acres resides right now, correct?
That's correct.
So I was how did they ever put a UGB around a wetland and a creek to begin with? And it seems to me that by doing the land swap, we're actually preserving more of the valued land that we want to have, which is those wetlands and the creeks and the farmland that's already there. And as you pointed out, we're decreasing the amount of farmland that we're going to develop by 15 acres.
Yeah, so I was not here 48 years ago. I'm old, but not that old. So I don't know all the specific ins and outs of the consideration that was given at that time by the city to define the specific Monmouth urban growth boundaries. I can say the principles of planning that would have most likely been applied at that time, and was looking for very compact and regular shaped boundaries. I mean, our city has the two main highways, 99 and Main Street, Highway 51, and it kind of creates those two fork quadrants. So, if you looking at it on the map, it almost looks kind of squarish rectangle. Well, this makes a nice regular rectangular shape when they drew that. And I would say, 48 years ago, the environmental protections that we had in place were not as restrictive as they are now. Certainly, it has become more challenging, costly, timely to go through all of the permits that are required to build in or near wetlands, floods, and creeks. So those regulations have just gotten more difficult. And to the point where a lot of developers will just avoid all those altogether, or I say it doesn't pencil out in terms of all of that infrastructure cost that gets loaded on that development. They can't get enough housing units to make it cost effective to build in those areas. So, and more recently, we had even issues with getting wetland mitigation credits like in our watershed basin. I understand there's been more that have opened up, but those are just kind of some of the challenges and things that they didn't anticipate, 48 years ago. Had they known that, I'd be very surprised if they would have included those properties. Highways, creeks, they make it very difficult to create well-connected street networks that make it easier for emergency vehicles to get through and that residents can get an access to different places. So they kind of serve as the physical barriers as well. But that's my suspicion, is that they created just kind of a regular rectangular shaped UGB boundary, and they probably looked at where there was already some existing development and kind of just moved outward a little bit from there. And so that area does kind of abut some of our older historic platted subdivisions of the city. So yeah, but it's the best I know about that.
But if I can take, am I hearing you correctly, to develop that, the current 90 acres would actually be even more complex because of the South Fork Ash Creek that goes right through that plot of land.
Yeah, it goes diagonally through. It's shown, or I guess it's going off the screen now, but yeah, it kind of bisects it at an angle going through that area. Mhm.
And then the plat that we're looking to swap for that, I've been looking at the Google, thank goodness they have Google Maps with cameras, right? And it looks like it's flat, there's no wetlands. There's already the city, city utilities are already up to it. So we would actually be destroying less of our valued land that we have in the current 90 versus the 75 that we're swapping for.
There actually are some national wetland inventory maps or identified wetlands through the National Wetland Inventory on the Area 1. They are much smaller amounts. I was looking for the acreage. I believe it was under an acre in size, so much less than the 90 acres being removed. Now, there will likely be additional wetland that will show up that are not on that National Wetland Inventory map is very cursory. It doesn't take a more detailed site-specific analysis. And so that was one of the studies that I mentioned through development that will need to be done and paid for by the developers to see if there are any additional wetlands on that property and protection measures placed on those. So it'd be remiss to say that there are no wetlands on that property. I just wanted to clarify that, but definitely a lot smaller impact than we're seeing on the area that's being removed, which is what allows us to help build more efficiently and cost effectively on that piece versus area that's severed by the creek that goes through there. Mm-hmm.
Councillor Opers, then we'll take hands after that of folks who would like to ask additional questions.
If I could add just a little bit of something, and this is hearsay, I admit, that when that first UGB boundary was drawn, a couple of the property owners came in and said, don't include me in, you'll never build on this. So even that long ago, and the city kind of had no choice under the standards that the state was applying at that point, but to include the lands that were included. So that's what I believe I understand. I'm not stating that as a fact. I'm stating that as what I understand. Suzanne, earlier tonight, we heard that the city is working with a developer. Is the city in any way working with a developer on this project?
To my knowledge, there has not been a specific developer identified on either of the areas proposed to come in. Area 1 has been or has reached out to an engineering firm to try to understand challenges with developing the property in more detail. But yeah, to my understanding, there hasn't been a specific developer identified.
Okay. And my understanding is that Eric Olson was one of the folks who testified, and he is a developer locally, but that does not mean that the city was working with him. He was simply exercising his right to speak up on this issue. And then we also heard that, well, you can always build where there's creeks, but the big problem with the parcel we're pushing out, that creek is a problem, but the bigger problem is that the property owner is one of those who said this property is not going to develop. Is that correct? So you know, that 90-acre parcel is kind of inviolate into the future. And if this city is to build the houses that we need for our kids to be able to live here and for our workforce to be able to live here, we're going to have to find that parcel somewhere else. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks. And also, I remember from our prior discussions and maps that the parcel that we would remove doesn't have city services to it or near it like the current one does. Is that what I recall?
Yeah, I think there may be some, and the city engineer would be better to answer this question, but if my memory serves me correctly, there may be some limited water service on Falls City Highway but not sewer service. So whereas there is both water and sewer in Church or Mistletoe Road that's been extended to Sunset Lane, which is just across the street. So easier access to those two services.
David Carr, city attorney and now our city engineer and now our public works director. That may be a little bit more information about that would be helpful. Thanks.
So I apologize. This is a little hard to hear in the back, but the question was related to the availability of existing services for.
Right, particularly parcel where we would take out versus the parcel that would be coming in.
Yeah, so the parcel that would be going out through development would have utilities available. We have capacity in our master plans, but it is pretty difficult due to the grades of the property and being the low point along the creek. We would anticipate needing another pump station to serve that with sewer because it includes the property on the other side. So you can't gravity a pipe down underneath and bring it up the other side, obviously. The part being proposed to be brought in has adequate depth and size in Church Street. And Suzanne spoke to this earlier. We have been contacted by an engineering firm who's looking at what it takes to develop that property. No developer was identified. They're coming in to look at what the existing services are, not just in Church Street. There are some other services north of the western campus that are available to this property if needed for capacity. But this is all, it's all kind of hard to figure out without a development plan on the property at this point. But yeah, the one being brought in is certainly a lot easier in my engineering profession to develop versus the property being taken out.
And one of the reasons that's important, because we do require developers to do this work, is they are able to make those homes more affordable if they don't have to put in the kind of infrastructure you're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. That's how our streets and infrastructure get built, is by developers through development. We, as the city, do not build streets, build utilities. We upgrade them, maintain them, things like that, but it gets developed or gets installed by the developer.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions of David while he's here? Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
All right, and additional questions? Sure, we'll take a comment from Councillor Belts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be honest, this is really not an easy decision. Land use never is, because it comes with real trade-offs. I've spent a lot of time listening to the concerns, reading all the documents we've been given, especially concerns around communication, and that's something that's very important to me. I also recognize that some of the concerns we're hearing may have been shaped by information that isn't fully clear or complete, and that can understandably create worry within the community. At the same time, we have to acknowledge a real tension in growing communities. We all support thoughtful planning, and it can feel different when that growth is close to home. This process is guided by state law and our adopted plans, and from everything I've seen, those appear to have been followed. But meeting the legal standard and meeting community expectations doesn't always feel the same. And I think that's important to say out loud. I do want to say transparency doesn't mean everybody agrees, but it does mean everybody knows why and when and how the decisions are made. That's why we deliberate here. So where I am right now is I'm still weighing this, and I'm still trying to balance the long-term planning goals and the concerns I'm hearing from the community. And I'm not fully settled yet, but I want to make sure that I get this right before I make a decision. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. And if you want to turn off your mic, ma'am. Thanks. All right, back to additional questions. Councillor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I will have some commentary that I'll reserve in the event that motion is placed on the table. But my question is related to public engagement. And I think that Councillor Beltz, you touched on this. I recognize that this has been a continuing theme throughout the presentation tonight, as well as the feedback that we've received here. When I say feedback that we've received here, I mean the hundreds of pieces of public testimony that council has received on this matter in an official capacity. I'm a little bit curious, and I'm going back to the packet that was presented here to us tonight and the staff report. And please bear with me as I pull this back up. I should have been prepared with it. A little bit curious about the nature of this decision and the public input that has been taken throughout the process. And in my mind, this potentially begins not necessarily with the legislature, but with steps that preceded that. And I recognize that not all those here tonight were present for these steps, but I believe that it is important, at least for myself in decision-making capacity, and for those here now, to recognize that they at least occurred. I'd be interested in hearing, any background information about, what went into the public engagement around this process, and as it relates to our values as a council and as a city. Memory serves, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, but memory serves that the concept of a potential UGB swap or UGB amendment was something that has been, included in council goals, at least exploring the possibility of that for many years. And I may be incorrect with that, but that's what memory serves. And I just, in general, like to dive into a little bit more explicitly what our engagement has been through this process. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that question, Councilor Lopez. You're correct in that the public engagement for this has actually started many years ago, and that's through those comprehensive plan updates, the housing needs analysis, and actually the housing production strategy. And so that's really the goal one citizen involvement time that there is to provide the feedback on the goals, the cities, I'd mentioned the city's growth rate, the policies around how's the city going to grow. And so as part of both that housing needs analysis and housing production strategy, we had numerous public engagement activities that occurred as part of that. Both of those had community surveys. We did stakeholder interviews, focus groups. We did in-person open house meetings and also virtual ones to try to get as much feedback and community input on those. So when we get to the step that we're at now, when they're public hearings, this is really more about the due process and are we following those city rules in terms of procedure, and are people getting to exercise their appeal rights accordingly if they feel like the city has made an error and are coming to those decisions. So it can be challenging. We know this in planning to get folks to get engaged at those earlier stages. It's not as feeling as directly impactful when you don't know if it's a specific property, so I understand that, that the frustration, I guess, that comes out there, it becomes more immediate, the impacts potentially when it's next to your property, and we get a lot more concerns that come out at that step. But the goals and policies that are put into place on the city's housing needs are really developed in those earlier steps, and that's the importance of having that engagement at those points. So I hope that helps answer your question. And you're right, there have been numerous town hall meetings where we have talked about housing and affordable housing. These issues have come up over the years and through this being a number one kind of council goal as well.
Thank you, Director Duffner.
Counselor Carey.
Yeah, discussions about the challenges of the urban growth boundary go all the way back to a guy named Mark Fancy, who was the public in Suzanne's position right now. So it's been an age-old problem. I mean, it's 48 years old and it's pretty well worn. The two questions that I have, and I guess in a way they're sort of comments, but I'd like to hear your reaction to them, Suzanne. We've talked about the people that choose not to develop their land to be annexed, and they are exercising their property rights. And should we deem necessary, and hopefully we never do, there could be some condemnation or eminent domain if it was enough. That's happened in other communities. I wouldn't recommend it. So, but my point primarily is that they are, we're protecting their rights by not doing anything other than nudging them once in a while. I want to say though that the land coming in, there are property owners there, and they have rights to their property to be able to do with their property as they wish and as is reasonable and as fits into the general scheme of things. So I'm hoping we're being equitable and we're being cognizant of both, on both sides of that. That makes sense. It's kind of rambling.
Yeah, and I don't know that we could actually use eminent domain to force a property to annex and develop their property. I'd leave that more to a legal question. I do know, yes, I agree with your point that it's the property owner needs to elect to annex unless there are very limited instances where they're completely surrounded by the city, or we have a majority of landowners in the area being annexed that agree to annexation. We can force it in those instances, or if there's a health hazard for something like failed wells or septic as well. So it's very, very limited. And that's kind of one of the challenges that we're seeing to this 50-year plus land use law that was passed, and that it just assumes every property owner will willingly annex and develop their property. And we're starting to discover in these areas that that's not always the case. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't ever suggest any kind of, even if it were legal, that we would, condemn or declare it eminent domain. So that was just sort of an example that we could go after them. The second question that I have, and when we developed this housing production strategy, this was an attempt to solve the housing shortage that we have. And there were a number of strategies that were provided. I'm going to list those that I think that we've acted on, and if you can correct my list, add to or delete from. But one of the suggestions was to increase housing density in all zones. The low density, medium and high density. We've done that. We've rezoned land to allow housing. When Hoffman Meadows on Hoffman Road, that's industrial land. That was there was a case made that we would change that, and we've got a very nice, wonderful development out there. Downtown residential, we've got more of that, and more probably to come. We've expanded the housing types and zones in terms of ADUs, different plexes, duplex, triplex, cottage clusters, townhomes. We've done that. That is now permitted. And we've reduced the requirements for off-street parking. We used to require more off-street parking on a single lot. We've reduced that to allow more room more density and more room for the actual structure. In our new TSP, I believe, I'm anticipating that we're going to reduce the width of our right of way. So that'll take up less space. Traffic lanes are going to be the same. And then the other thing, and you alluded to this, the possibility of a land exchange, land swap expansion of some sort, and it's come to this land swap deal. The reason I make that point is that the city is doing a lot of things to solve the problem. And many of those measures that I indicated there are applicable to new development. Not all, but most. And so without land, if we've got less than 12, we can't continue to do the kinds of things that have been done. So all that we've done, and I should have mentioned our development code, the revision of our development code, which was overarching and included in some of that. So the city has been doing a lot of work. We're still constrained by the land deal. And whether we can solve that or not, I guess remains to be seen. Anything else on that list? Or, I mean, you should be proud of that.
The other one that's really important that you're right, there are only kind of certain levers that the city can most effective. We don't build the housing, right, in most cases. So we rely on developers, nonprofit housing developers to build that. So we can control how much land, how it gets zoned, the codes, try to make them streamlined and easy to navigate. The fees, is the other one. But I think that important part is the ingredients to smart growth is that infrastructure and keeping up with that. And so we're very fortunate that we have great public works staff that are keeping those plans and working on those utility master plans and having the foresight to know what investments need to be made into those systems. So I guess the other one I would just say is just the investments in infrastructure that we know is critical ingredient for development. And the city's been successful at getting a $1.2 million grant to try to help study and expand infrastructure in an area that's, again, difficult to build in because of the creek and the floodplain issues. So that, and then just, again, trying to work with our nonprofit partners on partnerships and how housing gets built. So yeah, but it was a good list, and there's no silver bullet that's going to solve this issue. And so I think that's why we take that multi-pronged approach.
And we'll point out that increasing density inside the city limits is not popular either necessarily. So we are up against a rock and a hard place. Right. And Councilor McKeel.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I grew up in Indiana and where lots of farm space. And I actually would watch farmlands get decimated as the sprawl happened. So when I came to Oregon and I found out about the urban growth boundaries, and I went, cool, we're going to not do this kind of sprawl where you just like a monster is eating farmland. And so I like the idea of just keeping the town small, right? And I understand the need to have some houses because, you've got your kids growing up, they want to live here too. But the big discovery that I had coming on council, particularly looking at, we're now in another budget cycle, is what happens to cities if they don't grow at all, if there isn't any new housing. What happens to budgets? And I don't know, maybe this is to Rochelle, who has been more in budgets, but you're welcome to go on. But I think for me, that's always the kind of the surprise that I found, is that you can't stay stagnant as a city. So I don't know if one of you could.
We'll call on City Manager Rochelle Anderson and Councilor McKeel if you want to turn off your mic.
Okay, thank you. I think when you look at the Oregon property tax system, which includes measures 5 and 50, for cities for their general fund, that is supported by the property tax revenue. The cities we're getting it based on assessed market value instead of real market value. And so our revenues are actually capped at 3% a year when our expenses in our general fund can go up as high as they want to. And so all the cities are dealing with smaller revenue. That's why a lot of cities are adding fees and those types of things. One of the areas which you can do as revenue or revenue flow is obviously property taxes, which is based on development. So if you have more development, then you're getting more of the property tax revenue to help support the city and its services. So that is how that plays into that, if that answers your question.
So we do need to have some growth of new houses kind of consistently over the years in order to keep up with rising city costs.
Correct. Correct. The city tries to find revenue streams as much as possible, but property taxes, franchise fees, and those types of things are the main thing that fund the general fund, which funds your police services, which funds your libraries, your communities, those types of things in administration. So yes, as the city needs to grow so that our property tax revenue also increases to offset the expenses that we're having to deal with, especially in bad economic times.
Councillor Oberst. Anything? You have the history here with our planning in Monmouth as a member of the Planning Commission prior to your prior term.
Let me start by saying that when I was chair of planning in 2003, 23 years ago, was when I first heard about our situation with the urban growth boundary. And I was concerned. It was bad. We were going to, before too long, run out of places to build new homes. It's gotten worse. It's gotten way worse. We're down to 10 lots from what Suzanne said, where it'd be possible to build a house. I've watched housing prices in this town. I've got a house in my neighborhood right now. It hasn't been updated since it was built in the 60s. 4-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,000 square feet, over $500,000. And that's that. Show me how my kids are going to buy a house, and how your kids or your grandkids are going to buy a house. It's difficult. The Oregon property tax system. Excuse me.
Yeah,
this is my turn.
Yeah.
Don't try to shout me down for expressing my opinion, please. The Oregon property tax system, as was indicated, is also causing school districts, cities, and counties to come up against a really, really hard wall for their funding, to give the residents of the cities the things they ask for, from libraries to police protection to whatever it is you value that makes you happy that you live in this town. If you want to see Monmouth not grow at all, where you need to go is to the legislature to ask them to fix this property tax system. They have been thus far unwilling to tackle a growing problem because it's not politically popular to do so. I was concerned when I saw the poster that I see waving in my face that said, they want to do things. They as us, we're the ones who are considering this proposal. Everyone, all 7 of us, unpaid volunteers who do our very best to do our very best for this city and for everybody who lives here, all 12,000. We live in Monmouth. We want to see this city succeed too. Quick duck back to my time on the Planning Commission. I'm agnostic as far as what piece of land could come into the city, but I've been advocating for a swap for almost 25 years. And it has been nearly impossible to do so, and we have an opportunity to pursue that. If adding housing to Monmouth, and I apologize, I'm going to use an analogy because that's what I did when I was a teacher. If building more housing is like building a boat, we're not at the place where we're nailing planks to the frame. We're not adding ribs. We haven't laid a keel. All we're doing right now is looking for a boatyard that's capable. And the search has been long and hard. It's been going on for a long, long time. We have some folks who have family land just outside our urban growth boundary who have been indicating for a long time that they would love to come inside the urban growth boundary. We have been unable to do that. Now there's an opportunity. And I'm sorry, I have thoughts. I've been at this for a long time. I've been sitting up here for a total of 15 years in the last 2 decades. John Kerry has been here for 16. I've been sitting with Mayor Kuntz for a long time. You other 4, you're all newcomers. Some of you have been here 8 years, right? Right? And like I say, this stuff's not easy. We depend on our staff to give us good information. And then we do our very best to sort through it, to sort through what the law says, to come to a good decision. Yes, I advocate for this position, and I don't apologize for that.
Any additional questions for Suzanne? I had, sure.
What happens if we vote this down? What do we do next for housing?
Yeah, good question. So in terms of the House bill, the 2647 that authorizes Monmouth to do a UGB exchange, that bill is effective through the year 2033, and then it sunsets or expires. So if the council does nothing, then any new proposal would have to go back through this process with new findings to support that. I think you'll just continue to see that shortage, and even more of a shortage of land that's able to be built on. We do have some properties inside the UGB where developers have approached us that want to build on their properties, and they are in those creek areas, and they're telling us this one doesn't pencil out, we're not going to move forward, or we are considering moving forward at this time, but we know it's going to take at least a couple of years to get through they call that kind of the entitlements process of getting all the permits and approvals for that. So yeah, I mean, you will see, there's going to be greater pressure because there's less land available to build on. That means that those single family units where somebody's like, oh, I can put a triplex there, there's going to continue to be that even more pressure to densify inside the city, which can lead to other neighborhood compatibility and conflicts there. But as the land value goes up because there's not additional land to build on, then it makes sense in those cases to kind of look at redeveloping those properties. So you'll continue to see that pressure to go upward, and to build more on the multifamily end, and we know that we still have need for the detached single lot that are just they're not getting built. So yeah, I mean it's just more of like limited supply, the costs continuing to go up, I think is what you'll see. And people not being able that work in Monmouth not being able to find available housing. And then people that may want to downsize, they're a senior aging household, they want a smaller housing type. They can't keep up with the yard. There's no housing in Monmouth for them to age into place. And that's another one that we hear, frequently. So yeah, I mean, were you asking about more of enforcement in terms of the state or just the actual impacts that would happen?
I was curious what the impact would be.
Yeah.
And what we'll see 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road.
No. Go ahead, Councillor Carey.
Couple things. First, I'd like to acknowledge that man sitting right there. He has been awake the whole time. So, so good for you. Because I'm nodding a little bit, but you're alert as when you started. So good on you.
You're your government person right there.
He's good. One of the things that I think it would be remiss as we're winding this down is the appreciation of the thoughtful comments that were provided, in both oral and particularly written, where there was a little more time to be taken. And I thought, and not to call people out, but the McCarthys, I thought did a nice job. Both you, Shannon, and your husband wrote very nice and thoughtful, well-conceived letters. And I appreciated that. And I appreciated hearing from the 16-year-old farmer, a guy that's raising sheep and the 4-H kids. That's good to hear, and reminds us of the sort of agrarian culture that we have. All of those, it seems to me, would, should this pass and should we begin this process, all of those will continue to be available and largely unaffected. So whether it does or not, we'll have to see. But I think either way, you people that have the good, thoughtful thoughts will be able to continue doing what you're doing, at least for the most part. One of the comments that came through that I noted was actually from the Polk County Farm Bureau. And they sort of acknowledged that while they were opposed to this particular one, they understood, or said that we understood that for an Oregon city to expand, it will be into farmland somewhere. And because of the nature, and especially in the Western Willamette Valley, we've got surrounding all of our cities, we have farmland, and to Carol's point, we do all we can to protect it. But there will be a time in most cities where that will be, the expansion will be at that behest. You can't go over the top of another city. There are natural impediments to that. So it's kind of a, that's the way it is, to use a Paul Harvey term. Anybody remembers Paul Harvey? Anyway, just to circle back, thank you for the comments. They were helpful. They were insightful in most cases, and they're appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Carey. Any other last thoughts? And I will echo that, this piece about we make a lot of really hard decisions that affect people immediately. We have to vote to raise rates. We have to vote to change things and requirements that affect people immediately. And sometimes whenever we do these plans that are required by state law, our transportation safety plan, everything in our comprehensive planning, we are being asked to make decisions that affect people 10 years, 20 years down the road. If we don't make them, somebody else will. And Councillor Oberst and Carey and I will remember one of the times that we had a very heated council meeting because we were asking questions like, why didn't anyone ever do this? Wasn't this kind of issue? But why didn't prior councils do this? It was hard. It was something nobody really wanted to take on. It was difficult to make decisions that really negatively can impact our neighbors, our friends, right? Those things when we made a vote to ask the voters to bond a city hall, right? That's going to impact our property taxes. We all own property inside the city of Monmouth. Many folks here don't pay for this city hall because they're outside our city limits. So those are really hard decisions. This is one, if we choose not to make it tonight or by 2033, you said, somebody's going to make it, whether it's the seven of us or someone else, because unfortunately, that's the world we live in. Councillor Belts always says, we're making more people, we are not making more land. So we've got to use it as wisely as we can. And there are laws in place that we have to consider to do this. So I am going to go ahead and remind us there are two considerations tonight. And I guess that was, oh yeah, go ahead, Councilor Ridge.
Thank you. I was holding up because I didn't have any questions, but did have some comments to make if this is the appropriate time. First off, I want to thank the large group that has come in today. I think all the council would like to see more community engagement. Unfortunately, the way to gain engagement shouldn't be to make people angry and cause a stir in the community over large controversial issues. However, very happy that you're all here and encourage you to come and participate in our council meetings in the future, even when they're dealing with more mundane issues that are seemingly less exciting. So thank you all for coming. A couple of things I wanted to comment on just from previous statements. Councillor McKeel talked about growing up in a more rural environment, and I share the same view that the idea of urban sprawl is not really attractive to me, probably to many of the people in Monmouth for the same reason. We moved here. We enjoy the way that it is. We enjoy kind of the makeup. That's what's attractive to us. We like the ability to get to know our neighbors. We like the ability to be able to travel relatively easily from one side of the city to the other. We could talk about transportation challenges. That's a different conversation. But those are the things that make Monmouth really attractive to me. I understand the idea of growth and the need for thoughtful growth. If we look at our pattern of growth in Oregon, we do have slow to moderate growth, probably more on the slow side in most recent years. There were some peaks, and it's kind of tapered off. So I think our plans for growth need to reflect what's a reasonable trajectory for that. I don't see the need to potentially increase our capacity for residency by 20% or more, which would be the result of 70 acres of medium density housing at 16 units at about 2.3 residents per unit. We can still look at growth, and there's some opportunities that we have to look at right now. The parcel or the area 2, that's the close to 7 acres, I think would fit all the criteria that we were presented with. I don't see that the criteria is met for area 1. I'll talk about the reasons why. Conditions have changed, I believe, and some of these are subjective. I'll grant that other people might see it differently than I do. I believe conditions have changed. We don't have the same rapid growth that maybe we did prior to when the 2020 era, when some of these ideas and laws were created. Things have changed. The public need, I don't think is demonstrably there for large swaths of land to be filled with medium density housing. Part 3, adequate public facilities and transportation. I travel on West Church Street quite often, pretty much weekly. And I noticed that it runs right smack dab into a college campus, and there's really no other way, sans going through back roads, gravel roads through Dallas to get out. We haven't talked about a transportation plan for prospective housing that's off of West Church Street onto Mistletoe. But I see that as really problematic unless there was a road that was cut through directly through Western's campus, or if it was sliced through to reach Riddle Road. There's not really any way for safe egress for approximately how many houses did I come up with? 1,020? I'm sorry, looking at my math here. A lot of houses. And a lot of cars that come with those houses. So I don't know that that's a reasonable expectation for transportation in or out of those homes without really congesting that area of town. Part 4 was appropriate consideration for surrounding lands. And this is where I have some compassion for the not just the farmers, and that's a totally valid claim, as farmers not necessarily wanting to operate machinery and tractors around residential land, but also for the residents. I have some friends that live in that small subdivision just across the street. They complain about a lot of dust. They have to do extra cleaning. They're very clean people, and it's a hassle for them to try to maintain their property and their way of life while there's farm activity happening all around them. For those reasons, I don't believe that large parcel is appropriate for bringing into our urban growth boundary. But another point was the word success was used, that we want our city to be successful. We want it to be deemed successful. This is also a word that can be seen in different ways. I don't know that I would define success of our city as dependent upon the size of the city's budget and how that's affected. If it grows, then that somehow means that we're successful in the long term. That's not something that's a definer for me. If we have this many people that are not seeing it the same way, then perhaps we should look at some other markers. I think if we're upsetting our residents that gave us the privilege of sitting up here and making decisions about this and not doing the will of the people, I think that's something I take very, very heavily. And really, my priorities are the people that are currently here, not so much the future potential residents that may or may not come here. I'm skeptical about the rate of growth in Monmouth. Oregon generally is one of the oldest states. No offense to people that are older than I am, but we're not growing as rapidly as some of the younger communities in the country. So I'm skeptical that our growth rate is going to continue at the same rate that we've seen over the past decade for that reason. So I understand the point about making sure that we have sustainable lands that are available for future residents to come and move to Monmouth and enjoy it like we do. My loyalties are to my family and the people that are currently here. And I would like to see the cost of housing drop like everybody else would. But I'm also concerned about my home value dropping. So that's the other side of the equation. If you suddenly introduce lots of extra homes, that has an effect on the market. I would like to maintain the home value that I have. That's my dog in the fight, is I don't want my home to drop in value by artificially injecting hundreds of homes into the city. There might be an option C that involves taking in the smaller portion, the 7 acres, and maybe removing 7 acres of the 90. Maybe that's a possibility. I don't know if you can carve up land that way, but I would be totally opposed to the option of bringing in that area one into the city or the urban growth boundary. But that's maybe a different perspective of seeing it, but that's my thoughts on this proposal.
I'm gonna ask you please to be silent. I personally, we kind of want to move along. You've been here 2 hours. We would normally take a break at this time. But I am going to, rather than try to prolong this, see if anyone is willing to make a motion. We'll see if there's a second, and then we will consider whether or not we're going to need a lot of additional discussion to move forward. And if it looks like there's a lot more discussion to be had at the council, then we may have to take a break. So I will entertain a motion at this time. There are several options in the packet as noted. But I will make it clear. So is it an option to adopt the amendment but not change the to approve the exchange but not adopt the amendment, or are they tied together?
I think they're tied together because the amendment is the vehicle for adopting the UGB.
Okay. So there could be changes somewhat, but it's either adopt or deny both rather than split those two pieces up. Right? Councillor Lopez.
Madam Mayor, I would like to make a motion, and if I am understanding the motion that is included in our packet correctly, I make a motion to approve the proposed UGB land exchange to remove 90 acres, excuse me, to remove 90 acres and add 75 net acres of land to the Monmouth UGB. Adopt legislative amendment 2502 and apply comprehensive map designations to newly added lands to the UGB, and direct city staff to prepare an ordinance to formally adopt the proposed UGB land exchange and legislative amendment 2502.
I'll second.
So Councillor Lopez for the motion and Councillor McKeel for the second. I will accept just a brief comment from each of you at this point before we call for the vote. Councillor Carey, then Councillor Lopez.
My question is on the adoption of the comprehensive map, comprehensive plan. I understood you to say that was a type 4 process or decision. Does that suppose that because this is a type 4 sort of also, I guess it isn't a type 4. I mean, if we approve that now, it seems we're jumping over the top of the all that goes with a type 4 decision.
Yeah, the type 4 just applies to the comprehensive plan map designations, not the decision of whether or not to approve the land swap.
Correct, but the second bullet here includes the legislative amendment 20-02 and apply the comprehensive plan map designation. I mean, that's part of the motion, and that was part of my confusion on which one of these would be the most applicable.
I'm not sure I understand your question, but the proposed motion just put both decisions into one motion. So it's a combined motion. So while there's still two separate decisions being made on the land exchange and the legislative amendment, you need both of those together to be stated in the motion is my understanding, but I may not be understanding.
I want to clarify one thing. I think I heard Councillor Carey say he thinks that there should be another process to do the type 4. That's what we've done. That's the public comment. None of that was required for the exchange. The reason we've gone through the public hearing process, my understanding is that is the type 4. We did that because of our code, not because of the swap. Is that correct, Justin?
Yes, I thank you. I understand that. But yes, that's exactly it. The statute doesn't require a specific process for the UGB amendment. The reason we've done the type 4 process through all of this is because of the comprehensive plan amendment.
Okay, so should we, thank you, and I think I have it here. But if we were to approve simply the UGB land exchange and remove 90 acres and add 75 net acres, we could end it there, but then we'd have to come back and do the comprehensive plan map and the comprehensive plan amendments in a separate deal. And the thought being is that we've plowed that ground already throughout this whole process. So we ought to be in a position to be able to, without going through the whole rigmarole. Is that part of the strategy?
Yeah, I understood the attorney's feedback to say that you needed to vote on both of those together tonight so that when you have that land swap, if it gets approved through the process, you'd have plan designations to put onto those properties. But I will defer to legal counsel on that.
Well, my point, and it is, then why have the first bullet? Just simply to approve the UGB land exchange and remove 90 and add 75 to the Monmouth UGB.
This is a single motion, not 3 separate ones.
That's unclear, but I mean, I can see that, and I know that's his motion.
Yes.
But I'm looking at the proposed, singular, okay, all right. I'm taking me a while, but I'm getting caught up.
That's okay. And I think also I want to, if I recall, and you mentioned you had to talk to Polk County, part of that was talking to Polk County about the designation, right? If this does come in, how that would change the designation, because it's also part of the county's comprehensive plan. Is that right?
Yeah, we'll coordinate findings with Polk County as we draft that ordinance. And the city's role is to make the determination of the appropriate plan map designations for the ones that are in, eventually the zoning for the ones that are coming in. The county will then apply or retain, for that matter, the zoning that's already on the property going out, the suburban residential zoning.
That's right. Thanks. Councilor Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have two separate items that I'd like to address very briefly, or as briefly as I can, and I'll ask your indulgence. The first item, I recognize that we've had this open hearing that we've kept open through multiple meetings. I also recognize that through this hearing process at the beginning, we disclosed, conflicts of interest and or ex-parte contacts. And I recognize that the ex-parte contact disclosure may have been above and beyond, but since that is a precedent that we have set, I'd like to continue with that. As the hearing has been held open, I would like to take a moment to disclose that I have had multiple individuals from the community speak to me on this. I have not shared any inclination. I have not shared any, predetermined decisions on it. I have been given some pieces of paper advocating for one decision or another. I have shared those pieces of paper with our city staff so that there is a record of that. And I have, I would like that to exist on the record. And I would encourage all of us that may have had those kinds of contacts to make a similar disclosure if you have had. I will hold my other comment unless anyone would like to follow up on that comment.
We all get stuff, we all forward it.
Yep, certainly. But and I say this because I think the question of process, the question of process has come up a number of times in these proceedings. So in an endeavor to be as transparent as possible, I share that information tonight. I would also like to take a moment, my next comment is that I'd like to take a moment to discuss a little bit about, what thought process and the intentionality from my chair that has gone into the consideration of this proposal. And I recognize that you requested a brief commentary. I've held my commentary throughout this entire process to make way for questions for others. And so I'm going to take a moment to share a little bit about my values. And I'm going to try to look all of you in the eye in the audience as I share this. I do have some notes, and I hope you forgive me if I do refer to my notes a little bit. But I want to thank everyone for being here. This is public process. I recognize that we have lost some individuals to go to their dinners, to go to their homes, to take care of little ones. I have a little one at home as well. And I say that not because I want you to have sympathy for me, but because I have empathy for you in giving your time to be here tonight and engaging throughout this entire process. When I said earlier that I believe there have been hundreds of pieces of testimony given on this, I'm including the testimony that was given to the Planning Commission. I'm including the testimony that's been given verbally here in these chambers. I'm including the written testimony that I deeply appreciate and that I read every piece of. And I have full confidence that everyone here on the dais likely reads every piece of that written testimony. This is what we want. We want people in here giving us their views. This helps us make better decisions. I would like to say that I recognize that I made the motion tonight, and I made that with a bit of hesitation because it's clear that this is not popular. It is clear that this is a very difficult decision. I lean back on my values. And I lean back on the values of the community that surrounds us. And when I think about what brought myself and my family to Monmouth, and I am not a native Oregonian. My wife brought me here. She was born in Salem. She's lived her entire life within a 30-minute drive of where she was born. And I'm so lucky to be here. We chose Monmouth as a place to raise our child because of the community that exists here. We chose Monmouth as a place to put down roots because we want to give back and nourish this community and cherish the things that we have found joy in here. Those values do extend beyond Monmouth. Those values extend to the belief that everyone should have a home. Now, I don't know that this will answer the issue of everyone needing to have a home, but I do know that when I represent Monmouth and go into spaces like the League of Oregon Cities, the League of Oregon Cities firmly believes in the value of home rule. And we as the state of Oregon are a home rule state. What that means is that any rules that are not explicitly, any decision-making authority that is not explicitly given to the state is, by definition, given to the cities. This is one of the things that makes Oregon special. The League of Oregon Cities has openly stated on many occasions that they adamantly oppose urban growth boundaries and the laws that regulate them. I differ from this in the League of Oregon Cities space. This is not a popular opinion there to go as a city councilor and to say, you know, I love urban growth boundaries. And I do love urban growth boundaries. Urban growth boundaries keep our valley, keep our state looking how we want it to look. They reflect our values, our shared values as Oregonians. They preserve our farmland. They preserve our ways of life. They prevent urban sprawl and all of the negative things that go with it. Urban growth boundaries also, and individuals have mentioned Tom McCall and that initiative to prevent urban sprawl. I have seen the negative repercussions. I have lived the negative repercussions of, millions of endless seas of stuccoed houses and strip malls. That is not the future that I want for here. That is not the future that I want for this city. I've also seen what happens when towns stagnate. I graduated high school in a very, very small town of under 2,000. And I've gone back to visit that town recently, and it's not in the greatest shape. My decisions are not made here, though, based on the town budget. They're not made based on the fiscal pressures there. They're also not made based on my own budget at home. They are not made based on what I think will increase or decrease the value of my house, because that is not a value that drives my decision-making. The values that drive my decision-making are a desire to keep Monmouth a livable place, to maintain the great things that we have here. I believe in free markets to the extent possible. I also believe that individuals should have the right to exercise their own rights over their property and do with what they desire with their property, as long as it doesn't negatively impact the public good. When I look at this decision, I see protecting farmland on one side, and I see housing posed on another side. I do not believe that these two values are mutually exclusive. One thing that we, if we do move forward, will achieve in this is the removal of 15 acres from our urban growth boundary, from our eligible lands to be developed. And I see that as a success. It may not look or feel like the same success to everyone here, but I see the removal of 15 acres of active farmland as a success. I also see the right to use your property as you desire as a success here. This will not impact the ability of the neighbors of this property to farm. And I agree and I understand that some individuals feel that it may. In the current legal landscape, I do not see that this will prevent the neighbors of this property from farming. When I first moved to Monmouth, we looked at a parcel that immediately abutted farmland. And to some extent, I kind of wish that we had bought that parcel because I loved the view and I loved the exposure to that space. Our realtor told us, if you buy this, just know it will develop. I said, do you know what's going on? She said, no, that's how things work. I don't believe that unimpeded growth should be how things work. I do believe that they should go through public processes as we've had here tonight. And I do believe that this decision, regardless of the direction of how we go, will not jeopardize the values here that we hold dear in Monmouth. I will continue to endeavor to protect the way of life that we have here. What we have created special about this community is truly special. And I also cherish the farmland that is a very, very, very short drive or walk out of town. With that, and that sharing of my values, I will conclude my comments. Thank you for bearing with me, Madam Mayor.
We have 7 minutes before we typically adjourn. I'm going to get council permission to continue the meeting past the 9 o'clock hour. And at this point, then I'm going to ask for an opportunity to take a vote on the motion so that we can perhaps get through, conclude our business. So I will, Councilor Ridgway.
There's just a question before we go to that vote. If a similar opportunity but different came up in the future, is that something that we could take up in the same fashion, or is this a kind of a one-time deal? Like if a different proposal came forward, and maybe this one we're not to be successful, but a separate land swap opportunity came up, is that something that would go through the same process?
Okay. So if this passes, would we be able to go through the process again? Or
if it did not?
If it does not pass, can we go through it again? I think that's what you mentioned, that
As long as it meets the criteria and it's within that 2033 timeframe, I believe a new proposal could be considered, yes.
Okay, so this is not a one and done type of an opportunity. It could present itself differently later.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Councilor Oberst, one more.
Quick clarification. It would, if this does pass, however, the House bill does not open the door to doing this again. Okay. Just wanted, that was what I thought I understood. Thank you.
That's correct. With just one opportunity to do a land swap of removing 90 acres and bringing in 75.
All right, I'm going to ask our city recorder, Pam Dornbush, to call the roll.
Counselor Oberst,
Yes.
Counselor McKeel,
Yes.
Counselor Carey,
Aye.
Counselor Lopez,
Aye.
Counselor Belts,
No.
Counselor Ridgway,
Nay.
that gives us a vote of 4 yes, 2 no.
All right, thank you very much. The motion passes. And we do have additional little bit of business to take care of this evening. I am, however, unless anybody has a critical report. Okay, no critical reports needed. Councilor Oberst.
Tree planting, Saturday the 18th. Meet at Power and Light. We'll be all over town planting trees.
Folks, I'm sorry if you could kind of keep your comments down. We're going to try and finish our business real quickly. So if you could meet out in the hallway and close the door, please. Thank you. Any comments, anything from the manager's report we need to know?
Just a couple updates real quickly. So Representative Salinas.
Just a second, folks. Can we keep? I'm gonna let everyone clear out. We're gonna take about 30 seconds and hope folks can. Okay. Yeah. David, can you kind of help us get the doors closed? Thanks, Bill.
There they go.
All right. All right, thanks.
So this is in regards to the regional water treatment plant. As you know, we have been pursuing federal funding for that project. And yesterday, Representative Salinas published her project list for the next session. And she has included a $5 million capital allocation for the regional water treatment plant. So we're very excited about that. That's kind of all I really have for tonight.
Thank you, Counselor Carey, for visiting with our Congresswoman to be able to make the point that again, another thing that's very important for our future. All right, unless there are additional reports, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, thank you, Counselor McKeel. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All right, thanks. Do that.